of the Hebrew vowels to you, I realized that the approach that I would take normally by giving you the background story and the background history, of how these vowels got developed, might take a bit too long to actually get to the vowels when we are wanting you to get exposed to the vowels, and just like you learn the alphabet, to learn what the vowels look like, how they operate, and then to be able to apply them. So I decided that I'm going to do that. I'm going to jump in at the deep end, as it were, and just go straight to, which some grammars do. In fact, Kelly does this without giving you too much first of the background of the backstory, as it were, of what we call the Masoretic vowel points. This invention of this group of historic Jewish scribes and scholars who came up with a system, instead of helping you in understanding, what was the process involved in that, I decided I'm just going to jump in at the deep end, and after I've done that and got the exposure, I will then take a few steps back, and then give you a little bit of that fascinating backstory, because it helps you to understand more than just the Masoretic vowel points, but some of the other issues that they had to contend with in terms of what they actually arrived at. So this table is a table that you would have seen that is in your textbook, and it's in your notes. And it's basically a tabular presentation of that symbols that this group of Jewish scholars, of scribes called the Masoretes, you might have heard that name before, a very important contribution that they made to the preservation of the Hebrew text. The symbols that they developed in order to help us to read Hebrew words. Now, part of the reason for that, and I probably have to go back a slide to show you how, when you, for example, take a look at a text like Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Okay? This is Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. If I zoom it up a little bit. In which in the top line, is what you have already become familiar with. The usage of these characters that we call the letters of the Hebrew alphabet that will make up Hebrew words. But as we discovered that the Hebrew alphabet is a consonantal alphabet. There were no vowels that were preserved in the alphabet like we have, say, in the English alphabet, or even in the Greek alphabet. Okay? So the Greek alphabet and the English alphabet consist of both vowels and consonants. Most languages consist mostly of consonants, consonantal sounds, with a smaller number of vowel sounds. And it is that combination of consonants and vowels, when we put them together, that allows us to make words that will express meaning. And so part of the challenge of biblical Hebrew is that when the written form of the language was developed, they could only depend upon a consonantal text, those consonants that you've learned as part of the alphabet, to be able to write out a sentence like this, which is Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. We're going to look at the sentence a number of times because it's useful when there is a verse in the Bible that you know very well, or that you think you know very well. Like if I were to say John 3 verse 16, but everybody can say what John 3 verse 16 is. What are the verses that are there in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, that we are familiar with, that's especially going to help us to be able to learn some of the basics in the grammar of biblical Hebrew. And in fact, Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is such a verse, gives us quite a lot of characteristics and features of a Hebrew sentence. Not just the consonants, as you see over there in that top line. So that over there is consonantally what Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is, but we don't know what the vowel sounds are that are associated with it. So we can take a look at those letters and say, like, over there is the first word of the book of Genesis, which is in fact the name in Hebrew of the book of Genesis, which consists of, as you can see over there, a bait. Here it is written without a Dagish leaning for the strong pronunciation, followed by a resh and first word. But they are all consonants. The second word, which is actually the verb in the sentence, is a bait without an aration and aleph. Okay? So that's the verb that describes the action. That the subject of the sentence, which is actually the next word, the word for God, the general word for God in the Hebrew Bible is the word Elohim, but here it occurs just as consonants, aleph, lamed, hey, a yod, and a final mem. And so you can go through the entire sentence. For a verse that you know very well to be, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, which is the typical way and the most common way in which that verse is translated. It can be translated a few other ways, which has become quite a debate in biblical Hebrew. But for now we will kind of go with the well-known, most common, simplest way of translating it. And so that's what we have over there. But how do you read that? You see, if I was to try and read that as it stands, just consonantally, it sounds like gibberish. It maybe sounds like a foreign language, like Klingon or something, if you're into space movies, So you read that and you try and pronunciate it consonantally, then it'll be British, kind of sounds very awkward, You look at the second word, it is brr. That's all that it is. A b sound and a r sound, because the aleph is silent, And then you go to the third word, when aleph is silent, then you have to say the consonantal sound of the lamed, the hey, the yod, and the final mem, And then that word you'll pronunciate as the Hebrew, That just doesn't make sense. So what then happened was, because the spoken language of Hebrew did have vowels, but they did not originally develop a system of vowels like we do in our alphabet. They then had to come up with a system in order to account for the vowels. And the way in which that originally was transmitted was orally. So, in other words, everybody knew, what these words were when you said them, but when you wrote them down, they also knew that, for example, this first word over here, which means in the beginning, it's the word for the idea of Genesis. It's not a direct translation of Genesis, but it's kind of got that same idea. The word Genesis means origin. Whereas this word over here means beginning. You can argue it's the same thing, but if you think about it, there's more to Genesis than just the word that means origin. Okay? So anybody would be able to come to a word like that, and they would say, we know that is the word that actually is a composite word, because that letter bait in front of the word is actually what we call in Hebrew an inseparable preposition. A preposition is a positional word. That normally, if you think about it simply, it shows the relationship between different things. Its position. So it can mean in, outside, below, above, next door, beside. Those are all what we call prepositions, to show the relationship between things. And that bait is actually the preposition in Hebrew that's got many different meanings, but one of its most simplest meanings is in. That then is attached to a word that starts with a resh, and then an aleph, a shin, a yod, and a tav, that means beginning or first place. Okay? That's one of the things that it could mean. Literally, it means at the head of something, okay, at the start of something. So how is that word then pronunciated? So what you needed to learn when you were learning Hebrew wasn't just that when you're trying to read Hebrew that there's a consonantal text, but that there's an oral tradition that goes alongside that written text as to how that word needed to be pronunciated. And so that's how the transmission of the text happened for many years, for many centuries. They would record, just like you find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, a consonantal text of, say, a book of the Bible, like, say, the book of Isaiah, which was the first book that was discovered amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. But when you look at it, you see consonants. But how should it be read? especially if they were beginning to read, would be taught the oral tradition as to how the text would be read. So that when you come to a word like that, immediately you would know that that word is actually the word that should be read Bereshit. Bereshit. You can hear there a combination of consonants and vowels. And then the second word wouldn't just be Br, which as it's written there consonantally. You would then also learn the oral tradition as to how that word would be pronounced, a combination of consonants and vowel points, so that, because I know it, that word would then be read bara, which means he created, and so there was this long tradition, oral tradition, of the vowel sounds being encapsulated and being preserved in oral tradition along with the text. But I think, we sometimes think, oh, that's very difficult, But when you grow up in a culture that is very orally based, and in which you learn these things from a young age, and you grow up with it, and especially if you're part of, because not everybody needed to read the Bible. There were actually very few people that could read the Bible. There were mostly the priests, the Levites, and the scribes. Most ordinary people, they didn't have access to the Bible like we have today. We take for granted, that there's a general literacy amongst us. Most people function of what we call a functional literacy. They didn't need to read, and if you needed to have a text read, you would go to the synagogue and it would be read for you by people who were trained, who knew the oral tradition, etc. But what happens if that gets lost? Because there's always this chance that an oral tradition can get lost, no matter how well you preserve it, and even if you preserve it for centuries. And there are circumstances that facilitated that kind of threat to the oral tradition of how a text was to be read. Part of that is, the movement of people. So people either are forcibly removed from their land, through exile, they migrate, they become part of the diaspora, sometimes there's famine in the land, sometimes there's war, people escape, and they end up in places and countries where their first language is not the first language and the spoken language of the context in which they find themselves. And now if you have children in that environment and you grow up in that environment, then you are in an environment in which what was your first language is a foreign language. It's how you're going to survive in this new context. You have to learn the language of the people. And as that happens, it takes a generation or two, all of a sudden, what is your home language can become lost. You lose your ability, you lose your understanding, etc. So a system was needed to be found that would preserve what was that oral tradition. And that's the brilliance of the Masoretes, who came up with a system, and they weren't the only ones. There were other scholars who attempted, other scribes who attempted systems, but the system that became preserved, which is now the standard way in which Hebrew is written, when it is written with vowels, which in fact modern Hebrew has actually gotten rid of the vowels again. Once again, because Hebrew became a common language. It became a spoken language. It became standardized as modern Hebrew. And then the reverse happened. You don't actually need the vowel points any longer when you are growing up in an environment in which Hebrew is common, And so that sense of an oral tradition as to how words must be read becomes part and parcel of them again. And then the vowel points kind of disappear. So that's what's happening in modern Hebrew. But it doesn't mean that there's a complete ignorance of vowel points. So when you're growing up in school, they actually teach it to you, because you need to learn how to do it. So if you take a look at this sentence, the second sentence over there, it is there that you see you've got consonantally the same text, but under each of the letters, there are these dots and these little symbols, that are there. And that is what we call, strictly speaking, the Masoretic vowel points. They are not vowels. The vowels are the in-spoken language. But these are the symbols that the Masoretes invented to capture what they knew with the vowel sounds being communicated within the consonant text. So they needed to come up with a system that would account for all of the variations of the vowel sounds And by accent, we don't mean, the way in which you will speak a language, based upon the environment in which you are in. What is that twang, that you kind of put on, on your language, so that in English, we know there are different accents. There's South African accents, as to how you speak English, and sometimes you're able to tell which part of South Africa a person is coming from. There's an American accent, pronunciation of English, and even amongst them, there are variations, so that, you travel in the United States, people will often say, oh, you're from the South, or you're from the North, or you're from the Pacific area, because, what tends to happen is as people speak language within a particular area, there are these influences and developments in pronunciation, that kind of becomes part of that group. But that's not what we are talking about here. We are talking about accents in terms of grammar. Where does one place the stress when you are pronunciating a word? Like in English, we have some of these words, so think of the way in which people pronunciate certain words. We often say, is it potato or potato? Is it controversy or is it controversy? That change in pronunciation has got to do with where you actually place the accent. Which syllable is taking the stress? Is it happening at the beginning of the word? Is it happening in the middle of the word? Is it happening at the end of the word? And that's exactly what happens in Hebrew, because there's a basic assumption in Hebrew that every word is accented. Every word has got a place where the stress syllable is, where you put in your effort to be able to say that word. But accents does more than just that. Accents help you to also divide a sentence. Now we have got certain conventions for that in English. We call it punctuation marks, right? And so punctuation marks then affects the accentuation, the way in which you articulate a sentence. So we know that in English, when you turn a statement into a question, you have to frame and formulate it in a way so that it sounds like a question. So you can have a statement that says, you are good, but I can change that into a question by putting the punctuation mark at the end. Sometimes there's a change in grammar, and then you say, how are you? So I've just changed the way in which I've said that. I've changed the stress within the sentence. We change it into the question. We have pauses, right, within sentences that we use punctuation marks like commas and semicolons, etc. In Hebrew, they did not develop the same system of punctuation that we have. Commas and full stops, etc. It was actually through accents that they accomplished that. So that when you look at a sentence, you need to know where you take your breathers when you're reading the sentence. And so that is what we are talking about when we're talking about accents. And the Masoretes, in addition to the vowel points, had come up with symbols that illustrates that. Where do you place the stress on the word when you are pronunciating this word, so that this is your stress syllable, but also in a sentence, where do you take your breathers and where do you stop? How do you know you are ending the sentence? Where is the full stop? They did not develop a full stop like we did. They developed accents and other symbols to be able to do that. And so that is what I've captured over there. Now, not all of the accents are going to be important for us. The reason for that is one of the functions of accents in biblical Hebrew was to regulate and to guide what we call the chanting of Hebrew. You see, the Hebrew Bible, the way in which it was written and the way in which it was preserved, wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be sung, or what we call chanted. And that's why today you go into the synagogue, nobody reads the Hebrew Bible. They chant it. There's a particular tune, that you kind of follow. a chanting, and that chanting is regulated by accents. It's a way of capturing it. And in fact, part of the reason for that is not just an act of worship, but it's also a way of preserving the memory as to how you actually read the text. Because we know, like I taught you how to learn the Hebrew alphabet, you can learn it by repetition, by saying it, but it becomes easier when you chant it or when you sing a song. That kind of helps you, and the tune helps you to learn. And so that's the other thing that the Masoretes needed to do. No problem. And that's what we find captured in there. So the second sentence captures not only the symbols, and I'll point it out to you, like under the beta over there, under the resh over there are symbols that illustrates the vowel points. There are also accents. Like under the shin over there, you will see that there's a little curve there. Next door to the resh, and that what's a capital letter T, there's almost like the half of a square bracket, and then there's like an arrow point over there, and there's another one there, and another one there, and another one there, and there's a vertical stroke over there, and there's two dots over there. Those are the other symbols that the Masoretes invented, not just to capture, as I said, the vowel points, the vowel sounds, not just to point to, rather, the vowel sounds. That's why we call them the Masoretic vowel points, but also the accents as to how you read a sentence, where you take your breather, and then if you are chanting, how you actually go about what's the tune for the chanting. So we're not going to be focusing on all of the Masoretic accents because we don't chant, we read. However, we do need to pay attention to the accents that communicates punctuation. The accents that they use as the kind of the alternatives to what we have developed in terms of what we call punctuation marks. Full stops, commas, semicolons, etc. They have a different way of doing that. And so we're only going to focus on those accents. But I'm then going to start with the third sentence, because the third sentence removes all the accents and just then contains what we call the symbols that are the Masoretic vowel points. Okay? The symbols the Masoretes invented in order to communicate the different vowel sounds that makes up that word, so that when you read that word now, you don't need to depend on oral tradition. You just depend purely on grammatical knowledge. Because you know what sound a consonant makes, and because you know what sound the vowel point makes, you are therefore able to read the word. Okay? And so, if you know, like as I said in the beginning, you know that's a bait, it's a burst sound, that's a resh, it's a burst sound, that's an aleph, it's silent, that's a shin, which makes your sh sound, that's a yod, that normally makes a y sound, and that's a tav, that makes your t sound. What then are the vowels that are associated with that? What this word at the bottom is indicating to you is that attached to the bait is an E sound. That's what that thing that looks like a colon is below the bait, and two dots. Okay? But in Hebrew we're going to discover it's a half vowel that makes a very quick E sound. Then you've got a resh, and under the resh there is a colon on its side. You see that two dots over there? Okay? That will be an indication that this is a long E sound, or a long E sound, as we will say. Under the aleph, there is no vowel associated with that, so the aleph is silent. Under the shin, you'll see there's a dot. You see that? Okay? And that dot is another vowel sound, an E sound, for the vowel I, which in this word, the yod, you'll see it's got no vowel associated. There's no vowel under it. And so that's an indication that the yod has lost its consonantal value. It is combined with the preceding vowel, that dot over there, and form a new vowel, a longer E sound that will have a particular name. So that besides having yet learned, how you divide a word into syllables, because that's going to be very important. But if we just do it like you did when you were in grade 1, and you say, how do you pronunciate the word spelled C-A-T, the word cat, right? You will know. You say, okay, what are the phonetic values for each of those symbols? It is cat, right? And that's kind of the way you have to learn Hebrew. You have to read the value of the consonant, and then the value of the vowel associated with that consonant. And then you read the value of the consonant, and then you read the value of the vowel associated with it. And that's your pattern for every word. So let's start with a simple word, which is the second word. Right? So the second word, consonantally, consists of a bait, a resh, and an arif. Right? So over here, you see there's the bait with a dot in it. That dot is a dagish leading. It means that when you say this bait, you say it with a hard pronunciation. You say it as b, right? So that's the sound that a bait makes. But then under that bait, you see that there is what looks like a capital letter T. Now that capital letter T is the Masoretic symbol, the vowel point, that gives you the R sound as in the letter A in English, the vowel sound A. But phonetically it's R. Okay? So the way in which you read that then, knowing that the resh is a B sound, and under that you have the R sound again, and then you've got an alif which is silent, then you read it consonant, vowel, and then it becomes the word ba, ra. Ba, ra. Ba, ra, ba, ra. Okay? And so that's what will happen. With every consonant, there will be a vowel associated with that. Yes?
So how do you pronounce the first sentence?
So the first word, okay, that will be a bait per sound, then a very quick E sound. I'll give you the names for all of these later. I'm just kind of introducing you to the pattern. Then there's a resh. Then there is that colon on its side, which is a long E sound, which is A. That's the sound it makes. Then the alif is silent. Then there's a shin, so the shin is a sh sound. Then there is a dot under it. Now that dot is the letter I, or phonetically an E. But it's followed by a yod that has lost its consonantal value. So now it becomes a long E sound, so it is E. And then followed by the consonant tav. So when you say it, it is be, re, sheet, bereshit, bereshit, bereshit. Yeah. So you read it consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. That's the pattern you follow till you come towards the end. Okay? But you're getting the idea. Okay? So that now I take you then to the table of the vowels. Okay, so this is very important. So this is the table, as I said, you will find in your notes, which is an illustration of the vowel points that the Masoretes invented to try and capture the different vowel sounds that occurs in Hebrew. And in fact, what you will discover is, while there are more vowels than just our simple 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U, yes? That's the vowels that we have in English. Only 5 of them, A, E, I, O, U. But when we practice that those letters, A, E, I, O, U, won't necessarily be pronunciated like that, because that's the name. So the first one is an A, but the sound, the vowel sound, the phonetic sound that A makes in English is eh, but there are other variations of that as well. And English doesn't always indicate to you very clearly what those variations are. Hebrew, however, the Masoretes came up with a symbol and say, because we say eh in a few different ways, we will invent symbols to show how we say eh in different ways. So they were more sophisticated than us. They helped us a little bit. So what we will see, and what you see over there, is that the Masoretes accounted for 12 different vowel sounds that they call full vowels. Okay? So that's going to be a very, very important technical term for us to remember. That what you have illustrated over here on this table is the 12 full vowels in biblical Hebrew. And the reason for that is there are some other vowels that we're going to learn that's called half vowels. Now what's the difference between a full vowel and a half vowel? It simply has got to do with pronunciation. A full vowel in Hebrew is a vowel that when you pronunciate it, you hear the full vowel sound being articulated. There's no doubt that this is an R sound. There's no doubt that this is an S sound. There's no doubt that it's an S sound. However, there are vowels in Hebrew that's called half vowels. And what those half vowels do is, it takes the same values that we have for the full vowels, but it chops it off very quickly. In other words, these are vowel sounds that is pronunciated often so quickly you can hardly hear them, especially when they occur in spoken Hebrew. But what we are going to do, for the sake of clarity, we are not going to be treating the half vowels like that, because it can be very confusing. What you understand is that for the sake of pronunciation and learning the half vowels, we are going to pronunciate them like the shorter version of those vowels in the table of full vowels. Okay? And that's just going to make it easier for us to be able to read them. So let me illustrate that, what I mean by that. Let's go again to this first word over here. You see that word over there? The first word in the Hebrew Bible. That vowel under debate is actually a half vowel. It's a chopped off short E sound in Hebrew. Okay, which is, then the E sound, the E vowel in Hebrew is E. Okay, phonetically. Now, how do you say a quick E? E. In fact, in Hebrew, instead of saying this word by hearing the E of that second vowel, like I've said it, Bereshit, do you hear the E there very quickly? That's not actually 100% accurate. You should actually pronunciate the word as if you don't even hear that E sound. So that you pronounce it as Bereshit. You hear that S sound happened very quickly. Okay? But that's going to be difficult in the beginning. And so what I do is, when I'm going to be teaching you that vowel, which is a very important half vowel in Hebrew, it's got a name, it's called a Shavah. We're going to say, it's a very quick S sound, you're not actually supposed to hear it. However, in class, we're going to treat it like a vowel you can hear. And that's just going to make it easier for us to be able to learn it and to read it. Okay, so let me then take you through this table called the table of the full vowels. Now, this is how the table works. On the left-hand side, you will have, first of all, the name of that symbol, like over there. So each of these vowels has got a name, and there the name is given to us phonetically. And I'm going to teach you how to say that name. Okay? Then there is a symbol, a sign. The symbol that the Masoretes invented. Okay? That is the name, and that is the symbol. Then they show you, using the consonant Aleph, where that symbol is to be recorded. And you'll see that what the Masoretes did was, most of the time, they would place it below the consonant. Sometimes it's going to be next to the consonant, and sometimes it's going to be above the consonant. But most of the time, they use the space below the consonant to write the symbol. And so that's what you find over there. It's an illustration of the position as to where you write it. You see just below the consonant. Then what he does is he gives you the sound of that vowel symbol. He does it phonetically, showing you that it falls into the the category of what we call or a class that we call the R class vowels, the A, like we have the English letter A, in which one is going to be long and one is actually going to be short. And so that's what the strokes is about. However, in modern Hebrew, for example, it's very difficult to distinguish between a long R sound and a short R sound. Now, that is why when Kelly, and this table comes out of Kelly, when Kelly Trans gives you an example in English, he obviously uses American, but he shows that it's actually said in exactly the same way. But where you're actually going to hear the difference is when you're dealing with Hebrew words. And that's what he does in the next column. He illustrates how that vowel point is used by using the simplest Hebrew word he can find to illustrate what that word is. And so that's what we're going to be doing, and that's going to be helpful because at the same time, you are now going to be learning some basic Hebrew vocabulary, by learning some basic Hebrew words. How do you, for example, then say, pronunciate the word father in Hebrew? And how do you say the word daughter in Hebrew? Or the word God in Hebrew? Or the word house of, etc. Okay? So that's the way in which the table is listed. But what I want you to be able to see is how each of those 12 vowels, and you can see he's drawn lines in between them, those 12 vowels actually represent the same vowels, the 5 vowel sounds that we have in English. So fortunately for us, Hebrew has not invented vowel sounds that we are not familiar with. Okay. There are languages like that's got consonants that we are not familiar with in English, like utterals. And there are vowel sounds that they might have that we don't have in English. Fortunately, Hebrew has got vowel sounds that falls into the same vowel sound categories that we have. And so that makes it easier. However, when we refer to these vowels, we won't refer to them by necessarily the English names. To say, these are the vowels A, E, I, O, U. Okay? We will refer to them in terms of their phonetic value, their class. So we will refer to these first set of vowels not as the A vowels, but the R class vowels. And the second one, we won't refer to them as the E vowels, we will say they are the E class vowels, because that's the sound that they make phonetically. And then the same with the third one, we won't say they are the I vowels, we will say they are the E class vowels, because that's the sound phonetically that an I makes, E. And then these ones won't be the O vowels, but they will be the O class vowels. And then lastly, we won't refer to the last two as the U vowels, we'll refer to them as the U class vowels. Okay? So just like we have in English A, E, I, O, U, think of these vowels in terms of their phonetic value as A, E, I, O, U vowels. Okay? Those are the classes. A, E, I, O, U. Okay? Because that becomes helpful when you have to pronunciate the sound of the vowel, when you encounter it in a word, and therefore being able to say the word correctly. Okay, are you with me? Right. So let's first of all then start with the first category. The first category of R vowels that you can see over there. Now on my screen it's red, so there's colors to distinguish it. I must ask the seminary to change this VGA cable so that we can, later on it's going to be more important for you to be able to see it. Okay, so the first two vowels, so Hebrew has got two vowels, right? Two different R class vowels. The one vowel is long and the other one is short. The first one is a long vowel and the second one is a short vowel. In other words, just like you hear in English, you can say an R sound long, but you can also say an R sound short. You can say R, or you can say R. They are both R-class vowels, but the one is long, the one is short. Now, the first vowel, which is your long R-class vowel, is the vowel named Kamitz. Kamitz, you would like to say that? Kamitz. Kamitz. Okay? So that S at the end has got a dot under it, which actually means tss. So the sound, the name of that vowel is Kamitz. Kamitz. It's a long R sound. You can see there the symbol, the sign that they invented for it, looks like a capital letter T. And that capital letter T will be written in the middle under a consonant as it is done, as it is illustrated over here in the consonant aleph. Right? So that's a Kamitz. The short R vowel is called, its name, Patach. Patach. Would you like to say that? Patach. Patach. Yeah. So a patach is just a dash that is placed. See the sign over there? It's like you're going to be writing a Kamitz, like you're making a capital letter T, you just don't give it a leg. And you can see there you have the letter Aleph with a dash under it. And so that is a patach. So a Kamitz is a long R sound, and a patach is a short R sound. Okay? In Hebrew, it will be transliterated like this, phonetically. A small letter A with a dash on top of it to show a long sound, and then the same R sound, but with a circumflex, reverse circumflex, upside down circumflex, to show it's a short sound. In modern Hebrew, there's no distinction in the sound. But think of the R sound as it says in the word car. Okay, you hear the R there, car. Okay, in modern Hebrew, they don't draw a distinction, so they will treat a patach and a kamitz to be the same kind of R sound. However, when you begin to see it in a Hebrew word and hear the illustration, I think is valuable. The Hebrew word for father and the Hebrew word for daughter. The Hebrew word for father contains a kamitz, your long R sound, and your Hebrew word for daughter contains the short sound, which is a patach. So how do you say that? Well, both of these fortunately are monosyllabic words, but you read it consonant, vowel, consonant, right? So how do you say the Hebrew word for father? Aleph is silent, so you don't say it, but you read the vowel sound associated with an aleph, which is a kamitz, which is an R sound. Then it is followed within the same syllable by the Hebrew letter beit without a dagesh. So how do you say the Hebrew letter beit without a dagesh? Soft pronunciation, so it is v. You put all of that together, you get the Hebrew word for father, which is the word av. Av, you hear it? Long R sound, followed by a beit. Soft sound, av, av. You get that? Av. And that's the Hebrew word for father. As in, Avraham. Yeah? Yeah. So you remember that there are words that contains it. Or as in, Av Shalom, Absalom's name, which means my father is Shalom. Everybody knows the word Shalom, which is peace. My father is my peace, which he wasn't.
Yeah.
So by listening carefully and just thinking about words that you have encountered in your English text in Hebrew, you begin to pick up these concepts, that helps you to remember them. Okay? So that's the Hebrew word for father. The Hebrew word for daughter consists of a beit with a dagesh lean in. So now we say the beit with a hard b sound. B. Then under the beit, there's the short R sound, which is up, and that is followed, the syllable is closed with a tav, t. And so what you have over here, the Hebrew word for daughter is bat. Bat. B, short R sound, t, bat, bat. And that's the Hebrew word for daughter. Av, you hear the long R sound. Bat, you hear the short R sound. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay? So that then is your first class of vowels, the R class vowels, named Kametz and Patach. Kametz is a long sound, Patach is a short sound, and those are the symbols. Let me get to the next class of vowels. Now we get into what we call the E class vowels. And in Hebrew, they distinguish between at least 3 different E sounds, or E sounds as we call it. Okay? So there are 3 symbols that the Masoretes invented to capture the 3 different sounds that they knew they make when they pronunciate the vowel E, the vowel E. Okay, they are named Tsere, so that's the first one. Tsere, would like to say it? Tsere. Tsere. Tsere, the symbol is a colon on its side, 2 dots, and as you can see over there, it is written under the aleph like that. Just in the same place you would write the Kametz or Patach. Then, the next vowel, and just by the way, that's a long vowel sound. The next one is also a long vowel sound. And what happens here is Tsere combines with the consonant Yod, where Yod loses its consonantal value and it lengthens also the E sound into the vowel called Tsere Yod. Would like to say that? Tsere Yod. Tsere Yod. Yeah. And so Tsere Yod is written, as you can see, under the aleph, just like you would write a Tsere, but then it would be followed by a Yod. How do I know that that's a Yod that has lost its consonantal value? There is no vowel written directly under the Yod. So that Yod is floating. And when that happens, it's normally an indication that that vowel is no longer a consonant. It is now combined with a preceding vowel to form the vowel Tsere Yod. Later on you're going to see it can do the same thing with some of the other vowels. Okay? But the way in which it is written is like that. Then you get what we call the short E class vowel. The short E class vowel is the vowel Segol. Segol. Would I have to say that? Segol. Okay? So the first one is Tsere. The second one is Tsere Yod. And the third one is Segol. The way in which Segol is written, it is like you are drawing a Tsere, but you add another little dot at the bottom. So you have these 3 dots, which is like your shorthand for because. Okay, so remember, I don't know if you've done shorthand in school. When you have 3 dots with the 1 dot on top, it's therefore, you turn it upside down. Because. That's a way of writing because. Okay? Yeah, so it's like the shorthand because. And there you have it over there. Now, how is that illustrated? Well, once again, in modern Hebrew, they don't necessarily always distinguish between the different long vowels. You know, they're actually treated the same. But in order to illustrate them, it is Tsere is illustrated with an E, a letter E with a dash on top of it. And Tsere Yod, to distinguish it from a Tsere, is E with a circumflex. But the sound that they make in English is like the E and the Y in the word they. You hear it? A. You're taking the E and you're lengthening it. A. Okay? Whereas Segol, being the shorter one, is E with the upside down circumflex, as the E in the word met. So you hear E, very short. Okay? So Tsere and Tsere Yod is A, it's an E lengthened out, as in the word they, and the Segol is the short E sound, as in the word met. Now let's take a look at some Hebrew words. So we're learning some Hebrew now that illustrates these words. The first one is the general name for God. Now you have seen Elohim, okay, and you might have heard it before, but let me say it to you now. You know, which something for you to think about. The word Elohim in Hebrew is actually a plural word.
Yeah.
It means gods. When used for God, who was one, it will be translated as God. But that same word Elohim is the word used to refer to other gods. And because other gods are normally part of a pantheon, you will translate it as lowercase letter g with an S at the end. So they will be called gods. The word Elohim is actually derived from the singular form, which is this word over here, the word El. El, which is the word for God. Okay, so you hear the S sound, which is lengthened, because Aleph is silent, Tzere is a long S sound, which is A, and then you finish it off with a Lamed. You put that together, El is the word for God. In fact, it's a word that the Hebrews borrowed from the Canaanites, because the chief of the Canaanite pantheon is El, which is the god associated with bulls. So remember the story of the golden calf? That now to understand why it is significant what they were doing. Then the next word is a word that illustrates for us a tzerayod. Tzerayod. And this is the Hebrew word that means house of. Not the Hebrew word for house. This is actually what we call the construct form of the name. Hebrew doesn't have the word of. Never needed it. It would change the spelling of the word to communicate the word of. Okay? So the word bait means house of. Here it is bait. Tzera yod, you see it over there? The yod doesn't have a vowel under it. You see that? So that's how I know that yod has lost its consonantal value. It's combined with the preceding vowel, which is the yod, which is the tzera, to become a tzera yod. And then you have the tav at the end. So it is ba'at, bait, bait, the word that means house of, as in Beit Lechem, Bethlehem, the house of prayer, because the word Lechem is the word for prayer in Hebrew. Then a word that you have heard before, which is the name of the modern day currency in Israel, but was a measure in the Old Testament. It is the word shekel. Shekel, a shin pointed with a segol, which is a short S sound, then a kof pointed with a segol, you see it over there, short S sound, and it's followed by a lamed. Now this word is your first bisyllabic word, 2 syllables in the word, where the Masoretes have given you a little accent over there, and that accent means that unlike normal words in Hebrew, that if they have more than 1 syllable, where the accent will be on the last syllable of the word, sometimes your accent occurs on the first syllable of the word. And so that is what that accent is there. To show you that this word, which has got 2 syllables, shek and kel, is accented, stressed on the first syllable. So the word is not shekel, in other words, put emphasis on the second syllable. You put emphasis on the first syllable. The word is shekel. You get it? Okay? So shekel, we will say. That's a segol. You got that? Okay. Information overload, eh? Right. The next class of vowels, which is our E class of vowels. E class vowels. There are 2 vowels that makes up your E-class vowels in Hebrew, in the table of 4 vowels. The first one, like you have encountered with the tzere, your yod again features. The first one is called a chirik yod. Chirik yod. Say that?
Chirik yod.
Chirik yod. A chirik yod is a dot that is placed below the letter, as you can see over there, followed by a yod. And clearly, because there is no vowel under that yod has lost its consonantal value, it combines with the preceding vowel to make that into a long E sound. So chirik yod is your long E sound in Hebrew. Then your short E vowel is your chirik. Chirik, like to say that?
Chirik.
So chirik yod and chirik. Chirik is just a dot that is placed under the letter. You see it over there? A dot under the letter. How is that illustrated phonetically? Well, your chirik yod will be like your letter I, your I in English with a circumflex. So it's a long I sound as the I in the word marine. It's a very good illustration as to a long I sound. Marine, marine. Your short I sound is the letter I with a upside down circumflex, as in the word, American pronunciation, sit. Please sit down. A quick E sound. In English we will say sit. Okay? But is actually a. So it is, you must think of short E sound. So American pronunciation, sit. Sit. Quick E sound. Illustration of that in Hebrew. The Hebrew word that means she. The Hebrew word that means she. We call it the pronominal, the pronoun. Okay, a word that stands in the place of a noun is a pronoun. So instead of saying Adele came and repeating the name Adele, I can say she. Okay, replace her name with a pronoun. So the word for she in Hebrew consists of a hey, a chirik yod, and an aleph, which is silent. And so in Hebrew, the word for she is he. No gender. Functioning here. So the Hebrew word for she is he. You hear that E, long E sound, he. So that means she. The Hebrew word that means with is ayin, which is silent, pointed with a chirik, and then a final main at the end. That's a final main. Okay? So it is im. Im. Im means with. Okay? He, you hear the long E sound. Im, you hear the short E sound. Okay? So that's chirik yod and chirik. You with me? We're almost there. Or class vowels. Or class vowels. There are 3 vowels that make up your or class vowels. 2 of them are long and 1 of them is short. So the number 8 and number 9 is long. Number 10 is the short. Let's first of all take a look at the short vowels. So the first one, long or sound, is the vowel cholim. Cholim, you like to say that? Cholim. All your vowels thus far was written below the line. Cholim is the first vowel that makes its appearance above the consonant. So that where cholim is written, as you can see, you've got your letter aleph, and on the top left-hand side you've got the dot over there, and that's a cholim, a long or sound. The second one is, just like you encountered with the letter yod can lose its consonantal value. The vaf can also lose its consonantal value. And the vaf loses its consonantal value by having cholim appear above it, and then you get the vowel cholim vaf. Cholim vaf. A vaf with a dot above it, and it will be written like that. So it appears next door to the letter, like you would write a normal vaf, but you indicate that this vaf has lost its consonantal value and it now appears with a dot above it. And so that is your long or sound. Let me illustrate that because the short one is slightly more complex. Okay? So here once again, it's very difficult because American English doesn't actually have long or sound like you have in English. So they treat it like we treat the letter, the O, like the letter O in English. Okay? So they will say your cholim vaf is as the O in the word ro, so it's O. O, ro, because the United States English doesn't have O in the pronunciation. In South African English, you do. But this is best illustrated in these 2 Hebrew words over here. The Hebrew word that means not or no the negative particle, we call it in Hebrew, is this word. Now watch very closely because this is printed Hebrew. It's a lamed with a cholim vav printed above it. It's not an aleph with a dot on the right hand side. Okay? So this lamed has got the cholim. A lamed makes the sound l, and the cholim is o. Okay? And the aleph is silent, so the word lo means not. Lo means not. Okay? In fact, in Hebrew, you can negate an entire sentence just by putting the word lo in front of it, and then you make the whole sentence negative. No, you can say in Hebrew, he is good, and if you want to say he is not good, you take exactly that same sentence, you put lo in front of it, and you negate the entire sentence, and you say he is not good. You know, so Hebrew's got a fairly useful way of doing it. You know, Greek also does that. Okay? Use a negative particle, put it in front of a simple statement, and you negate, you change the entire statement. The Ten Commandments starts out like this. Lo, not you shall. Not, it takes a positive, it negates it, and then it becomes what we call an absolute negative. The Hebrew word for light consists of an aleph, a cholim, vav, and a resh. And this is the word or, the word for light. Light. And God said, let there be or, and there was or. So that's the Hebrew word for light. So those then are your two long or sounds in Hebrew. And as you can see, the way in which I pronunciated law doesn't sound like your word ro. As I said, you know, while it's useful to have equivalents in English, when you don't have that equivalent in English as an American pronunciation, you know, it becomes a bit confusing. Right, so that's the Hebrew word for light and for not. Right, now the next one is a slightly more complicated one. Your short or class vowel is called kametz chatuf. Like to say that? Kametz chatuf. Kametz chatuf. And its symbol is what we have seen before. Kametz. Kametz. Which is written exactly like a kametz. So it tells you that something has happened here in history that has associated your kametz as a long R-class vowel to a kametz chatuf, which is your short O-class vowel. So it's written exactly the same as a kametz below, but it is a short O sound, as in the word cost. It's actually, once again, American pronunciation, because American pronunciation doesn't actually have the short O sound as we have it phonetically. However, it is this Hebrew word over here, which you're going to encounter as a very common word in Hebrew, that pronunciates, that captures the short O class vowel. Okay, so it's written exactly like it is a kametz, but in this particular case, it's not a kametz, it's a kametz chatuf. It's the Hebrew word that means all of, and this word is pronunciated kol and not kal. Okay? So here, your kametz is an O sound, and so it's a kametz chatuf. It's not a kametz that is an R sound. The question in your mind is, how do you know the difference?
That's right.
There's a rule that you're going to learn. And that is what makes Hebrew grammar fun. Rules determines what it is. Now, I'm going to tell you what the rule is, but the rule is not going to make sense as yet because you've not learned all of it. The rule is going to be this. Whenever you find that symbol in what is called a closed unaccented syllable, it's going to be a kametz chatuf and not a kametz. So that means you're going to have to learn two things. You're going to have to learn what is a syllable in Hebrew and what makes a syllable closed and what makes a syllable unaccented. And that's when you're going to find you're dealing with a kametz chatuf. Now let me say this to you. Kametz chatufs in comparison to comets are very rare. So most of the time, when you come across that symbol, you're going to discover that you're dealing with a kametz chatuf and not a kametz. For example, the Hebrew word for wisdom is one of those words that you will learn has got both a kametz chatuf and a kametz in it. But it's going to be one of the words that I'm going to illustrate this rule to you, so that you will know that the Hebrew word for wisdom is going to be the word chokhmah, where the O is a kametz chatuf and the A sound is a kametz. They're going to appear in the same word, they're going to look exactly the same, but you're going to pronunciate them differently. So don't worry about that. We're going to get to the rule. It sounds difficult. Believe you me, it's not. When you see it the first time, it's going to sound strange. You practice it a few times, you're going to pick it up very quickly. Okay? So it's going to be a closed, unaccented syllable that's going to determine that you are dealing with a kametz and not a kametz. Alright, let's then get to the last of our full vowels. The last of our full vowels. Now we are dealing with the U class vowels. The U class vowels. There are two of them. The first one is long and the second one is short. The first one, the long U class vowel, is the vowel shurek. Shurek. Say that.
Shurek.
Shurek is formed using a vaf, where the vaf loses its consonantal value, and you put what looks like a dagesh, a dot, inside that vaf, and then you get a shurek. You see that over there? That's a vaf with a dot in it. But that vaf has now lost its consonantal value, and it now behaves as a long U class vowel. The second one, which is the short U class vowel, is kibbutz. Kibbutz, almost like the place where people go and live in Israel. Right? Kibbutz. Kibbutz is 3 dots written in descending order from top left down to bottom right. So 3 dots placed like that. So when you see that associated with a letter, Aleph written with a shurek, Aleph written with a kibbutz. How are they pronunciated? Well, the long U sound, a U with a circumflex, as in the English word rule. So you hear that? Long U sound, rule, U. But kibbutz is the U as in the word pull. You hear that? Quick U sound. So rule, long U sound, pull, short U sound. That is shurek and that is kibbutz. Illustrated by these 2 words. So you've seen the pronoun for female, she. Now you see the pronoun for he. The Hebrew word for he is a hey, pointed with a shurek. You see it over there, followed by an aleph. And that's the word hu. Hu. Hu means he. Hu, he. Hu, hu, he. Hu, he.
No, you.
Hu. The Hebrew word for he. The Hebrew word for table illustrates a kibbutz. But this is now a bisyllabic word in which you also are introduced to the first of the half vowels. You see under the lamed over there, you see that there's a colon. Okay? So when we deal with half vowels, that's the first half vowel we're going to deal with. This half vowel over here is actually the silent version of that half vowel. So the silent version of that half vowel tells me that in this word over here, the lamed ends the first syllable. So this word has got 2 syllables. The lamed ends the first syllable, and the chet starts the second syllable. Okay? So there you've got a shin pointed with a kibbutz, and a lamed that ends the syllable, which means that you don't say that vowel that's under there. So the first syllable is shul. Shul. Right? The second syllable is chet, which is sound, with a kametz, which is a, and then followed by a final nun, which is n. So the second syllable is chan. Shulchan. Shulchan, the Hebrew word for table. Shulchan. You hear the quick oo sound over there. With me? Shulchan. So that is the Hebrew table for full vowels. Run over it again. There are 5 classes for the full vowels in Hebrew. That's basically the equivalent of what we have in English, A, E, I, O, U. But we will refer to them in terms of their phonetic, their sound classes as A, E, I, O, U classes of vowels. Okay? In which each of them you will have a long version or versions and a short version of that vowel. In your R class vowels, you've got 2. The first one is kametz, that's the long vowel sound. The second one is patach, which is the short vowel sound. In your A class vowels, you have 3 vowels, 2 of them long, 1 of them short. Tsere and tsere yod, that's your long A class vowels, that makes the sound A. A. The short one is the vowel segol, which is an E as in the word met. Okay? Your third class of vowels is your I class vowels. The first one being chirik yod, and the second one being chirik. The sound that chirik yod makes is E, the long E sound, and the short one, the chirik, is I. I, short E sound. Your next class is your O class vowels. O, 2 of them, long, cholim and cholim vaf. Long O sounds, as in the word lo and the word or, the word for light. But then you've got the kametz hatuf, which looks like a kametz, which is actually your short O class vowel, as in the word kol. That's how that last word is pronunciated. And then finally, you have got your U class vowels. There are 2 of them, a long one and a short one. The long one is shurek, the short one is kibbutz, and the sound that shurek makes is U, long U, as in the word wu, which means he, and the kibbutz is a short U sound, as in the word shulchan, which is the word for table. And that is your 4 vowels in Hebrew. Any questions? So what does it mean now? What is next? Well, you have to memorize this. You have to memorize it. You have to learn the name, how you say it. You don't have to spell it exactly like they do. It's more important that you know what the name of it is, because it's rare that you actually have to write it out. Most of the time we're just going to be talking about it. Okay? So you need to know that the names are kametz, patach, tsere, tsere yod, segol, chirik yod, chirik, cholim, cholim vav, kametz hatuf, shurek, kibbutz. Okay? And what I will do is, unfortunately, there's no Hebrew song that I know of that's useful. I'm sure something has been invented somewhere, but I haven't yet found one that I think is good enough to be able to do this. You just have to learn it. Okay? And so you need to know what the symbol looks like, how to write it, and what is the sound that it makes. You know, as in the examples. And in doing that, you will then know the table of the 4 vowels. But we unfortunately can't leave it there, because Hebrew also has a few half vowels. Half vowels. So, like we've got the table of full vowels, and remember, full vowel means that when you say the vowel, you actually hear the full vowel sound being articulated. That's why they're called full vowels. You can do it long and you can do it short. That doesn't in any way take away from the fact that it's a full vowel. However, there are very short versions of the vowels in Hebrew, and they are called the half vowels. The half vowels. So we have to learn them, and fortunately there are only a few of them. The first one is the vowel called Shava. Shava. And what a Shava looks like, and in the Hebrew word for Shava, under the shin, you see over there, there's something that looks like a colon. Can you see it? Okay, a colon. And that is the symbol for a Shava. A Shava can be vocal, in other words, you say it, but a Shava can also be silent, meaning that it will appear in the word, but just like an aleph, you don't pronunciate it, you don't attempt to say it, but it has to be there. Okay? And you're going to learn the rules later on for distinguishing, how do you distinguish between what we call a vocal Shava and a silent Shava. For now we want to deal with the vocal Shava, the Shava that we will actually pronunciate. Okay? And so that's the one that it looks like, and in fact I've already done that. The very first vowel in the Hebrew Bible is actually a vocal Shava. The vowel that you encountered in the word that means in beginning. Remember that. So if I go back, and there you have it. Under the bait, there is a Shava, a vocal Shava. But how is that Shava pronunciated? Think of the segor, which is the short S sound, and think of how quick you say it, and then chop that in half, and that will be the sound of a Shava. Very quick S sound. There are a few Hebrew words that you will encounter in which that happens. One of that is the first word in the Hebrew Bible. And as I said to you, to help us, we will actually pronunciate a Shava that's vocal as if it is a segor. Because it's very, very difficult in spoken Hebrew to distinguish between a vocal Shava and a silent Shava without forgetting about it. So I've illustrated the way in which that Shava would be pronunciated normally in the pronunciation of the word will be Rashid. Very quick you almost didn't hear the S sound, but we will say it as Bereshit, so that we can actually hear the S sound. Okay, so that it will help us. Another very short word, and I think I've got it in a later slide. The Hebrew word for fruit has got a vocal Shava in it. It's a simple word. It's the letter P with a dot, so it's the P sound, pointed with a Shava, followed by a Resh and a Chilik Yod. So that when we say the word, we will say it as Peri, so that you hear the S sound. Its actual pronunciation is Pri. Pri. You hardly even hear the S sound, because that is your vowel Shava, which is this half vowel sound. Okay, so that's what the Shava is, and then the Shava can combine with three other vowels that we've already seen to form what we call compound Shavas or composite Shavas, to form other half vowel sounds. A Shava can combine with a Patach to give you what is called a Chatif Patach. Now the word Chatif literally means to hurry the sound. A hurried Patach sound. That's what Chatif Patach literally means. Hurry the Patach sound. So when you combine a Patach like that with a Shava, you get Chatif Patach, as in the Hebrew word over here, this first one, the Hebrew word for I, the pronoun first person common singular, is an aleph with a chatif patach, a nun pointed with a chilik yod, and that word is pronunciated ani, which means I. And you can see in the transliteration, the way in which they recorded chatif patach is they take the letter A and they write it as a superscript. to show you it's a very, very quick R sound. That is Khatif Patach, Ani. The Patach can combine with a Segol, and it will give you a Khatif Segol, a hurried Segol sound. It's written like that. It looks like a bit of a mess, like you're playing dominoes. And you can see there, it's your Segol, but together with the Segol, you get that, which is actually the first vowel that you have in the word Elohim, because that's where you get your E sound from in Elohim. But that's the word Khatif Segol. Illustrated, for example, in the Hebrew word that means male or man. It's the word that is Enosh. You have a very quick E sound. Okay? Khatif Segol, Nun, Cholem Vav, and a Shin. Enosh. Very quick E sound. And then your Shava can combine with the Kametz to form what is called a Khatif Kametz. But the Khatif Kametz is not a short R sound, because we've already got a short R sound in the Khatif Patach, which cannot be shortened. So a Khatif Kametz is actually a very quick O sound coming from the Kametz Chatuf. So the Hebrew word for sickness or illness is a word that's got a Chet, a Khatif Kametz, you see it over there, a Lamed pointed with a Chirik Yod, and you get the Hebrew word Choli. Choli, that means illness or sickness. And those are your 4 half vowels. Shava combined with your short full vowels to give you quick versions, the quickest possible versions of those sounds. Khatif Patach, which is a hurried Patach sound, Khatif Segol, which is a hurried Segol sound, and Khatif Kametz, which is your hurried Kametz Chatuf sound, which gives you your short O sound. And those, ladies and gentlemen, are then your half vowels in Biblical Hebrew. Its classes are, Shava is an E class vowel, Khatif Patach is an R class vowel, Khatif Segol is an E class vowel, and Khatif Kametz is an O class vowel. And having said that, once you have learned that, we are then going to be able to now, based on the knowledge that we have, be able to form Hebrew words, not just with the consonants, but with the vowels as well. So that we now have, and please pardon the Hebrew on PowerPoint, because they can't always print exactly where those vowels are. So some of them is going to be out of place, like the chirik over here, which is under the vaf of the name for David. And so here you've got it. David in Hebrew is D-A-V-E-D, David. That's David in Hebrew, pronunciating both the consonants and the vowel sounds. Long R sound, short E sound, pronunciated, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. D-A-V-E-D, David. David. The word for house, bait, pointed with a tzerayot. The sound that tzerayot makes is a. B-A-T, bait, bait, which means house, or literally house of. Another word that you'll find in Genesis chapter 1, the word that means land or country. It's a bisyllabic word. Aleph pointed with a segol, Resh pointed with a segol, and then a final tzadeh. Bisyllabic word, the first syllable is Aleph and the segol. The second syllable is Resh, segol, final tzadeh. The Hebrew word Eretz, Eretz, that means land or country. Eretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the Eretz, the land, the earth. Whichever way you argue, you must translate it. The Hebrew word for servant is the word that consists of an ayin, pointed with a segol, a bait without a dot, pointed with a segol, and then a dalet without a dot. Bisyllabic word. The first syllable is iron, silent with a segor, e, and the second syllable is bait, soft pronunciation, v, pointed with a segor, followed by a dialect, eved, eved, the Hebrew word for servant or slave, and so on and so forth. Our time is up. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is, as I said, I'm going to be putting the video up for you. There's going to be two videos. The first video is going to be a background story as to how the Masoretic points came to be. The second one is going to be a recording of what I've just done. You know, taking you through the names, the pronunciations, giving you examples, etc. You know, so that you can practice that. Okay? Yes? And